And welcome to Beyond the Paranormal Podcast. It's another Tuesday that's rolled around here so quick. Like I said when we first started this podcast, Tuesday just comes so quick. But we have an awesome interview for you guys and gals. But first, I just like to say, please go out to YouTube, subscribe to the Paranormal Podcast. That would tremendously help us out and keep in touch with us because we got a lot of stuff that's going to be happening here in the next few months, and especially leading into next year. Especially our live Halloween paranormal event that we're going to be doing. That's going to be cool. And I will say, depending on Wi-Fi, I'll say that depending on Wi-Fi connection, if that's going to happen. But we're trying. We're.
John, you're cutting in and out.
Mm-hmm.
Am I really?
Yeah, it's cutting
Like
in and
how
out
bad
pretty
am I cutting
bad.
in and out?
It's
Oh,
it sounds like you're being remixed. It sounds like we're listening to the
All right, let me go
remix.
back out. Hang on. I'm going to reload.
Okay. So, Dave, I was looking at your website and I was like, man, you've done just about every kind of show out there. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Can you-
30 plus years of doing this, that tends to happen.
Yeah, it'll accumulate.
What about now?
It sounds better.
Yeah.
Sounds better? I need to restart. What? Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound good now.
It just got sick. I don't know. But anyway, folks, Dave Spinks. He's a paranormal researcher and author. Dave has been seen on various television shows to include one of my shows, Expedition X, Woods, Paranormal 911, The Unexplained, In Search of Monsters, and These Woods Are Haunted, which I watched that today, to name a few. He was also featured in the film Flatwoods Monster, A Legacy of Fear by Small Town Monsters. So we're going to talk to Dave. So, how you doing, Dave? And welcome to the podcast, man. I hope you're feeling a lot better than what the last week, man.
Oh, yeah. Just a little allergy, flu bug or some cold or something, but only lasted a few days and still getting a little bit better over it. But, got a little bit of lingering stuff, but mostly allergies this time of year started affecting me. So it is what it is.
All right. Looks
Welcome
like
to
my
the
connection's
South,
going
right?
down. Yeah. Looks like my connection's going down again. Do I still sound okay or am I distorted again?
You sound good.
I'm good
Okay.
so far.
All right. Just let me know, guys. Crit, you want to take it off and just do whatever? Go ahead. I'll let you.
Just take it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I was talking to John a little bit about earlier was your episode on Terror in the Woods.
Mhm.
The episode, I was going to confirm that this was the episode. So yours was the episode with your grandfather, correct?
Mhm.
Like you guys were out
Mhm.
together, and then you
Yep.
had like a Bigfoot encounter, and you were younger then, correct, Dave? Like you were like younger.
13, yeah. That's what started me in all this madness.
Do you want to tell us a little bit, like the folks that are listening and watching from home, like what happened? Because that episode really stood out to me because one, you're out with your grandfather, you're in the middle of nowhere, and you're this young kid, and this really terrifying thing happens. So if you want to tell everybody a little bit.
Yeah, I've talked about that for I don't know how many years, but basically we were out on one of our fishing trips, place we always went to and camped out and fished for like a weekend, and it was getting just before dark, and we had caught our fish, cleaned them, and ate them. We were sitting there just enjoying the fire, or sitting there happy, full, ate like kings, all this trout we had caught, and Grandma cooked up cornbread and all that and sent it with us, and we were just having a great old time. And then out of nowhere, a giant rock hits out in the middle of the river, but we didn't know what it was. We just, out of nowhere, this huge splash hit the water. And it was so big of a splash that it rained down. It rained down like kawoom, and then all these droplets came down, and it startled us. Now this, the Gauley River there is pretty powerful big river, and for it to even make a sound that loud and rain down like that, it took a serious something, So we jumped up, looked around, tried to figure out what caused that. We knew it wasn't a fish that big. There's no way. If it was some kind of monster, But the other side of the river from where we were was really steep, and people really didn't even go over there because it's so dangerous. They could fall to their death. One slip and they're down hitting rocks and rock cliffs and everything else. So after several minutes of trying to figure out what it was, we couldn't figure out what it was. And Grandpa said something like maybe a rock rolled off the bank over there. We just didn't hear it or see it, and then it hit the water. So we kind of just chalked it up as, oh, well. We sat back down and kind of scratching our heads trying to figure out what that was. It was how weird it was. Well, a few minutes later, you hear a sound of something clipping tree limbs, and out of the peripheral of my left eye, I looked because I saw something, and there's a rock, about yay big around, bigger than a grown man could hardly get his arms around, coming up and out through the trees and hit into the river.
Gosh,
Made another splash, and that time we saw it, and we jumped up again, and we're like, what in the heck? And my grandpa yelled across the river, you hoodlums, knock it off or I'm going to shoot. Well, because in his mind, he's thinking there's people over there messing with us. Well, there wasn't no people over there. We didn't see anything or hear anybody. And about the time he got done saying that, you hear the most god-awful guttural howl sound you can imagine just roar down through the canyon, that we're in. And I look to see what he's doing after I hear that, because I'm petrified at this point, and he's running back toward the tent. I knew he was going to get the shotgun. So he comes running back with the shotgun. It's just an old squirrel gun we kept with us, single shot squirrel gun for snakes and whatnot on the river, So he yells across there again, and that thing's hollering and carrying on whatever it was. We haven't seen anything at this point. All we can do is hear it. And then we start seeing, 30, 40, 50, 60-foot saplings, some trees about yay big around that are really tall start shaking, and the brush is doing all kind of wild stuff, and this thing's yelling and screaming, carrying on. So he cracks off a round over there. Well, then it got even crazier, and he starts racking another round. He yells at me, get to the truck, boy. So I run to the truck, and I'm scared to death, and I kneel down on the driver's side by the front tire, and I'm peeking around the front bumper looking in that direction, trying to figure out what's going on. And all the while he's cracking off, I don't even know how many shots, 6, 7, 8 at least, whatever. And then you see the thing, whatever it is causing this ruckus, you can track it by the brush movement. It starts moving up and away from us, going up the embankment there, on the other side that's really steep. And it finally comes into a clearing, and I see it from about the waist up, and it's covered in blackish, brownish hair, but it never looks at us. I never see its face, but it's massive. Its shoulders are so wide that its head looked really small. Has no neck. It's just pure muscle, and it just keeps going up and away from us. And then I look, and I see my grandpa come running. So that's when I knew he saw it too. And basically he grabs me with one arm, opens the truck door, slings me through the truck cab. And the only thing that stopped me was the passenger door being shut, or I would have went completely through the truck cab. He jumps in the truck and he yells, that's not of God, son. We're getting out of here. And we tear out of there. The truck's bottoming out. I was like, oh God, he's going to break the truck down and the thing's going to come and kill us. And we finally get up out of there. Sounds like pieces of the truck have fallen off because we were getting out of there so fast. And we drive around for several, 15, 20 minutes. He's not saying a word. And he finally pulls over and says, because he was a preacher, you got to remember, he's a Baptist minister for 40 plus years. So he pulls over and he says, we better not tell no one about this. They're going to think we're crazy. And he didn't want his parishioners thinking he's drinking or doing drugs or crazy or whatever. So we never told anybody about it for years. And, in the TV show, I always tell this when I speak about it at conferences and stuff, because this is what's one of the questions I get all the time, what started you in this and this and that, and that's it. And I tell people, you got to be careful what you believe on TV, because in the TV show, they acted like we spent the night after all that thing went down. We didn't. We got the heck out of there.
Sure, yeah.
and you gotta remember, TV is entertainment, and
Right.
I was naive to that. And when I agreed to do the show and tell my story, well, to my dismay, I was like everybody else. When it came out, I saw that they added stuff that didn't happen, and they kind of made it seem like the Bigfoot was on our side of the river, which it wasn't. You know, I said, I was like, man, you don't need to add anything to it. It was already scary enough. It scared me to death, changed my life, is what I do, why I do what I do today. And, but that's TV people for you. They just happen. Yeah, that's what they do. So unfortunately, that's the bad side of it in the supernatural and paranormal realms. But
Yeah.
overall, they did a pretty good story. They did a pretty good job telling the story for the most part, other than adding in stuff that didn't happen and changing the order around somewhat of how it all went down.
Do you
So,
regret? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you regret doing that now, or are you glad that you did do it to get your story out there? Because
Well,
lots of people have these experiences, but they're just so scared to say anything.
well, nowadays it's much more widely accepted than it was when I started doing this stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
You started talking about this stuff in the old days. They try to put you in a loony ward or whatever, or judge you or whatever. Now it's more pop culture, and people are coming forward. In the store I have now, Dave Spinks World of Weird, I get people coming in daily. Say, they tell me, they say, you don't know how happy I am that I have somewhere. I've been holding on to this situation that happened to me 30 years ago, and now I feel safe to come in here and tell you about it. So, it's a good type of situation now. I mean, and people, knowledge is power. The more we talk about these things, these supernatural experiences and sightings that most of us have had something in our lives happen that we could not explain, that didn't make sense. So, and in a lot of ways, mainstream churches and stuff, they don't want you talking about this stuff because it doesn't talk to them. It doesn't talk about it in the Bible. But let me tell you something. It does talk about all this stuff in the Bible. Book of Ezekiel talks about a fiery metal wheel that came out of the ground. That's a UFO. It flew in the sky. It talks about giants. It talks about all kinds of supernatural situations in the Bible. People just don't interpret it and read it, and we haven't been taught it. They kind of steer away from that stuff. And unfortunately, that's an unfortunate thing because it is real and it's out there, and there's a ton of unexplainable things going on in the universe and right here on this planet as well.
Folks, if you have any, sorry, Crit. Folks, if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to put them in our chat room. We'll get to these as quickly as we can. Hey, Bryce, thanks for coming in here. He says, hey, guys, and hi, Mr. Spinks. And so there's one already. I do want to ask this because I know you've been doing this for many years. What about like odor and smell? Do they have like an odor and smell that you can tell when you've been on these cases before? I mean, have you smelled like, okay?
So when it comes to Bigfoot, my only real up close and personal experience was what started me in this. I have been in the woods where I smelled some strange smells, but I can't say it was a Bigfoot, right? But many other experiencers and people have reported that they smell like really bad sulfur, rotten egg smell when they've had close up, like right in your, face encounters with these creatures. For me personally, I've never smelt one. I smelled some weird stuff in the woods that was similar to other guys and people that I've interviewed over the years, what they described, but I didn't see the creature only but the one time, and when my young life I saw it. I don't know if I ever want to see another one, to be honest with you, but unless it's from a far distance off. But because the power of this thing exuberated was insane. I mean, this thing was massive. It could have crushed a man like, nothing. And when you see something that, you just look at the great apes, look at gorillas. They can smash a human like it's nothing. This thing was 3 times as big as one of those at least. And I mean, and the power that even a chimpanzee, can kill a man really easily. So, and when you start talking about gorillas, and then you start talking about something that's 3, 4 times bigger than a gorilla, I mean, a human really would have no chance at all. Same thing with a grizzly bear. Look how big a grizzly bear is, 1,200 pounds. When it stands on its hind legs, or a polar bear anywhere from 7 to 10 and 12 feet tall. So, I mean, we look like little peons compared to these things, you know.
Oh, yeah,
So,
for sure.
it's you know, and there's not very many reports out there of humans being outright like beaten to death or anything like that. But unless you go back to many tales of various Native American tribes where they were warring with these type of red-haired giants, and they go by many different names. Each tribe has their own name for them. But in some cases, these creatures were kidnapping members of the tribe and pretty much eating them. So, you know, as such as with the Paiute legends and stuff. So, you know, what these things are, what they're doing here, nobody knows for sure at this point. You know, if they do know, it's probably the government, and we know how the government is. They keep all that on lockdown. So
Mhm.
you could go, when it comes to Bigfoots or similar type creatures, you can go many different directions with these things. Some people believe that there's some sort of ET race. Some people think that they are simply the missing link between man and ape. You know, some people think they could be ghosts of a long dead extinct ape species. So, you know, it's like an onion. And oftentimes when you investigate these things, there's many layers, and then you peel back the layers and you're left with even more questions than answers. So that's just the
Right.
nature of the game when you investigate and research these types of things.
You said something right in describing the smell that just caught me off guard because I do paranormal, and I know you do paranormal. But the sulfur and the rotten egg smell, that goes along the lines with demonic, usually.
Right. Yes.
Usually. So when you said that, it just clicked to me. I was like, wow, wait a minute. I wonder if there's a connection with that, possibly, if it could be a skinwalker, maybe. You know what I'm saying? I mean, who knows? We don't know
Right.
anything about Bigfoot.
Right.
I wonder
Who's to say a Bigfoot's not a skinwalker? We don't know. I mean, that's another whole down the
Onion.
rabbit hole situation you could go down, you know.
Yeah.
or maybe it could be a situation where they live in habitats that are close to like natural gas deposits that smells like sulfur. You know, there's all
Mhm.
these theories and stuff that you can throw out there and, you know, like speculate.
Mhm.
But speaking of the terror of like facing this being that is astronomically strong in an isolated area, like how long did it take you, if at any time at all, to feel comfortable to get back out into the woods? Like,
Well, that's a good question. You know, I didn't go into the woods for probably 6 or 7 years, like deep into the woods. And even when I did, I had to have a whole bunch of people around me, like, you know, and it started slow. You know, we go to like, and you know, gotta remember, I grew up hunting and fishing and stuff, and you know, in the woods by myself many times. You know, hunting, squirrel hunting, whatever. But after that, you know, I was so leery, and um, you know, I started with friends going back a little ways into the woods, and then a little more. But then, you know, I always made sure I had a gun with me, no matter what, and I still do to this day because of that. But you know, it's just one of those things. And of course, I was in the military and everything else, so I became a lot more mentally strong and capable, dealing with the fear of running into something like that again. But still, I mean, I've been in the woods even as a young adult in my 20s, and the hair on the back of my neck would stand up, and I knew something was not right. Something was watching me out there. Um, Whatever the case, and that's happened to everybody I know. You know, has been out in the woods, and this uneasiness came about, and they said,
Yep.
"Man, the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood up," and I don't know, but I felt like something was watching me. I said, "Well, probably was something watching you." But
Oh, yeah.
and we're not talking about a deer or a bear. We're talking about something else, something a little more ominous. So you know, it
Is
is
that?
what it is.
it's like the
I've even,
apex predator tinglies, you know, like you get that tingly sensation, like if
Mhm.
oh,
there's
yeah.
an apex predator in the area. Like we talked about this before, I think with maybe it was Daniel Benoit and maybe Zach as well, where we talked about a little bit about that feeling that you get when you're in the presence of something that's like an apex predator, and you
Yeah.
know that
Yeah,
you're the
and
boss.
we all have that. We all have that built-in self-defense system. It's in our DNA. You know, it goes back to, you know, cavemen. You know, that your senses are on high alert when you're out in the woods for whatever reason, because you're out there in nature, and then you know you're hunting or whatever. Even if you're hiking, and you know the birds are singing, you can see various animals, squirrels, whatever, and then all of a sudden there's a snap of a branch, and all of a sudden everything just stops or whatever. and you can
Oh yeah.
take your cues off of other animals, because most of them aren't afraid of humans for the most part. They'll run away, but they don't. When something else is out there, everything just stops. The birds stop singing, everything stops. And it's just, you can tell when something's not quite right out there sometimes. So it's
See,
kind of an eerie feeling.
that's my experience that I had when I was deer hunting. And this is like at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by that time, man, that forest is alive. You know what I mean? The hills are alive at that time. I mean,
Yeah.
everything is going crazy. But
Yep.
as I was walking up the road, I had the same experience like you did, man. Just something told me I wasn't even maybe 150 feet into the hills walking down this road. And just something told me that, man, there's something else here that just doesn't feel right. And normally I'm like you, Dave. I'm comfortable in the woods when I go deer hunting. I'm normally fine.
Mhm.
But that morning, man, just something didn't feel right at all. So I went and sat down, got out of the way where nobody could see me and nothing could see me. And I heard this snap. And I mean, not just a snap, I mean a loud echoing snap. And it was just like it was walking real slow. So I was like, then I was looking around to make sure nobody else was there hunting around me. Because you got orange on, man, that's going to stick out like a sore thumb,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Didn't see nobody in orange. I got my binoculars, was looking around. Maybe somebody just took their orange off, but at least they would have their orange hat on. And, at least, if you had common sense, you'd have orange on somewhere. Nothing. I saw absolutely nothing, but could hear it actually walking and taking steps. I mean, not taking little steps. I mean, taking like big stride steps. Like you hear snap and then pause maybe 20, 30 seconds, snap, another one. But
Hmm.
like in further distance, you know what I mean? Like it's going away. But I'll never forget that morning. The hair stood on me on the back of my neck, and I was like, I had my gun ready. That's the first time ever I loaded a gun quick in my life. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, that was
That's the
weird.
thing that gets me about some of these, like not just the shows or just people's experiences. Like we're in Kentucky, like people
Mhm.
don't go out in the woods and they're not packing something.
Mm,
Like
Right. Yeah.
no better than to go traipsing around out in the woods because we got black bears, we've got mountain lions, we got all that stuff. But when you
Hmm.
hear about folks that go out on these like 2 or 3 day long hikes in the woods and they don't have any kind of personal protection, I'm just like, whoa.
yeah,
Like that is playing Russian roulette in my opinion. Like,
I
no,
call
thank you.
BS. I call BS on it. They got to have some type of protection. They've got to. A
I'm
knife.
Well,
telling you.
unless there's some city person that doesn't know any better, and they
Well,
call
yeah.
themselves a Bigfoot researcher or whatever, and they decide they're going to trek out in the woods, and they don't know what they're doing, and they can get in all kind of trouble, because they just don't know any better. So
I've watched too many horror movies and read too many books. It ain't
yeah,
never gonna happen. They ain't gonna
right.
catch this little country girl traipsing around out there. Like,
But
don't sneak
this
up
is
on me. You don't want to do it. You don't want
this
to
is
test
how
me.
a horror movie starts. This is how it starts, folks.
Exactly. I'm not the one, and this is not the day.
Yeah.
So
Oh
that's
yeah.
exactly it. So, Dave, I also saw, like, I know we've talked about your experiences, like, with Bigfoot and that sort of thing, but I also saw on your website that, you also do UFO investigations.
Yeah, I
So,
do it all. I do it all, guys. I mean, it's all, a lot of this stuff is in a lot of ways, not always, but in a lot of ways and a lot of times, some of this stuff is interconnected. It runs together. So,
mhm,
like, I'll give you an example. Like, there's been many people I've interviewed who have contacted me that have seen a Bigfoot, right, or something like a Bigfoot that in their description, but at the same time they saw strange lights in the sky, or vice versa, right? So, or they saw what they claimed to be like a werewolf or a dogman type creature, but they also saw strange lights in the sky, or what I've been noticing from other investigators and having talked, with some of my counterparts, that people they've interviewed, and then they go back and look in the same area, and they see in the same area that there was a rash of Bigfoot reports, there's also strange light reports at the same time around the same days and whatnot. So, as investigators and researchers, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't look into all aspects of this stuff and kind of think outside the box looking in, because we just don't know what all these things are. Okay. And there's many, many reports out there and if you do any research, there's a lot of accounts that are very historical where strange creatures were seen, and there was also strange lights or craft seen in the sky too. And there's all, and on the flip side of that, I've investigated hauntings. Okay. Where I interview the people, and once I decide if it's legitimate and they're not doing it for a specific purpose, I go out there, and then when I get to the location, they tell me, well, I'm also having these dreams of these little gray creatures in my bedroom at night and all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You didn't tell me that in the original interview. So, what's going on here with some of these paranormal phenomena. So, in the old days, you were either a UFO guy or a Bigfoot guy. You couldn't mention the two in the same sentence, or you would be ousted by both genres of those fields, right? Nobody wanted to hear none of that. But more and more researchers and investigators are finding out there's some kind of weird connection sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. So as investigators and researchers, you have to think outside the box sometimes.
I got two things here. Robert, this is my buddy Rob, who I paranormal investigate with, who just put in here. I never go into the woods with anything smaller than a 10 millimeter and 2 spare magazines. Never know what's lurking out there. That is correct, my friend. And I want to tell you this story, Dave. This recently happened. Okay, so my friend, she battled paranormal stuff, and she's got all that took care of. But a couple of days ago, last week actually, we had a full moon. All right. She's freaking out, and I'm on FaceTime with her, talking to her back and forth, and she's like, John, I'm freaking out. I'm like, why? I mean, what's going on? I know she's outside, but I was like, what's going on? I didn't hear nothing, Dave, nothing at all. And she's like, there's these lights up here in the hills. I said, is somebody up there with a big, spotlight or anything? Is it moving directional? Is it different color lights? What is it? She's like, no, look at it. She's like, this has to be the moon. So the lights are changing colors, and they look like they're falling down. But they're falling down and they're rotating, and they've got lights, different color lights. I said, that is not the full moon. And she's like, man, that's got to be the full moon. I said, when does a full moon sparkle like some Hollywood movie? I said, it's not. I said, you've got something on there. And I want to send that video to you if you don't mind. I want you to check it out.
Sure. Yeah, send it to me.
It is something that I've tried to tell her that she's got something there. That's not from the moon. That's going sparkly down. I said, it
the
don't
moon
happen.
Don't fall down anyway.
Exactly.
Let's hope not anyway. We got bigger fish to fry.
We're in big trouble if that happens.
Exactly. So I was like, that's not anything with the moon. I said, that's something there. And I said, that coincides together, the sightings and full moons. It's just like weather patterns. When new weather patterns come in for paranormal, I mean, man, that sparks up the paranormal like crazy. I said, so you've got something here. But she's like everybody else. She's afraid that they're going to think she's crazy. And I've never thought she was crazy before in my life, because I know this. I know people experience this. And people are just so scared to accept this, that there's other stuff out there.
Well, people got to realize too, the government has pretty much came out and said there's stuff flying around in the sky. We don't know what it is. So it's acceptable now, folks. If the government says it, you can say it too. You're not going to be, you can just say, well, the government's saying that. So what are they going to say to that? So, it gives people like me who've been doing this a long time. We got validation now that, hey, we're not some kind of crazy nuts running around, but I was also, over my young life, I was in the military. I was in the Air Force for 9 years. I also grew up on Air Force bases from the time I was 6 years old and then I went into the Air Force myself after college. But, I've seen some stuff in the sky. One of my jobs was guarding every known aircraft that we have, to include stealth bombers and fighters and whatnot. But I've seen stuff out there that I know for a fact was not human. There's no way. And if it was made by us, it was technology we garnered from somewhere else, because, there's nothing that we have that can cruise 20, 30,000 miles an hour from one horizon to the other and not make a sonic boom, cutting through the air, at the speed of sound. And these things were covering from horizon to horizon, and then stopping on a dime, making making a 90-degree turn, and then sitting still for a minute, then shooting straight up into space. We don't have anything like that, literally, we just don't.
Do you feel that UFO sightings are more common now than what they were, or do you just think that?
I don't think it's ever quit. I think whoever these beings are, and there's probably multiple races of them because they're just like people. There's good ones and there's bad ones. I think they've been visiting here, if not been on this planet for thousands of years. The proof's in the pudding with a lot. If you just watch the show, if you've never seen Ancient Aliens, I highly recommend it. It makes a lot of common sense, and then there's been people way smarter than me and all of us put together, PhDs and all these mathematicians that, and now they're being proven right because with the new telescopes out in space we've put out there, they're seeing planet after planet after planet that are in Goldilocks zones around stars. And some of them look just like Earth, folks. I mean, and some of them are bigger, but they got water. They're very similar looking to Earth. So, and there's some famous mathematicians, it started with Frank Drake, and he came up with what's known as the Drake equation. And it shows that, there's literally his first equation shows that there's millions of planets out there that can inhabit life, but it's been expanded upon by even more smarter people. And they said now it's more like there's as many habitable planets as there are grains of sand on a beach in the known universe. So, if you use your brain and your common sense, you're going to realize, hey, the odds of it's less odds there not being, intelligent life than there are that there is. So, the odds of there being intelligent life out there are pretty astronomical. Now, are they going to look like us? Who knows?
Right.
Are they millions of years advanced technology in us? Maybe so, probably so. So for them to be able to travel back and forth, how they're doing it, we don't know yet. Or maybe we do know, we just haven't been told yet, right? So you notice the government's been trickling stuff out for years through, movies and everything else. So, and there's a whole, we could go down for weeks and weeks of shows just talking about that one aspect, but it's pretty fascinating stuff, and people, when you've got folks, astronauts have talked about what they saw for years and years, and people that are highly credible people, police officers, military members, astronauts, and so on and so forth, talking about what they saw. You got to take that into account. They're not making stuff up. Okay. They're just not. They have a reputation to uphold, and they're not going to, what's it going to gain them? It's going to hurt them, if anything, right? Especially in the older days, So, I think it's fascinating, and they're drip feeding us a little more at a time. Okay, the government's pretty much come out and said, okay, there's stuff flying around. We don't know what it is. There's stuff coming out of the ocean and going into space. We don't know what that is. So by them just admitting that is pretty much saying, yeah, they're there, but we're not going to say they're little green men in a spaceship at this point, So whether they're drones from somewhere else, we don't know. It's just still fascinating that they've come out and finally admitted, okay, there's stuff out there we're not quite sure what it is.
And speaking of the ocean, we know so little about it that who knows what's going on down there. Like if I were from an alien planet and I wanted to come and inhabit Earth and observe from a remote location, you probably couldn't find a better place than at the bottom of the ocean. So
that's exactly right. The ocean is so vast, way more ocean than there is land on this planet, and so deep. There's deep trenches so deep that you can fit like 2 or 3 Mount Everest in it. They could hide down there all day. We'll never find them. But on the flip side of that, Christopher Columbus, himself and his captain's log documented a UFO come out of the water and go into space. And, our subs, our Navy has documented stuff moving underwater at unreal speeds, and then they've got them coming out of the water, going into space. So more and more is coming out. I think at some point we'll probably have full disclosure, but that's going to take the government pretty much saying, yeah, we've been lying to you for the last 70, 80, 90 years, so they're not going to just come out, they're going to play it off like, well, we thought it might be this, but yeah, it turns out it really is this. So
they're like, we released this information, but it's like every other word is redacted.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
I like this.
It's all about technology and the arms race. That's all it is. It's the military-industrial complex. So, it's all about, okay, I want that technology so I can rule over the planet. unfortunately, and that's not what it's all about, but that's what they
Right.
do.
I want to say what Rob says here, and me and him have had this conversation many times, and way cameras are these days. All right, he says, so what's with all the crappy UFO footage still showing up these days? Everyone's got 4K cameras on their phones. The stuff should be crystal clear. Is it interference from the UFOs or a government safeguard in the phone hardware to prevent gathering clear footage, perhaps? So, we've had that conversation many times.
That could go, yeah. I mean, that could go so many different directions because, you've got something that's moving so fast that the camera filming at 30 feet, it films whatever, 30 frames per second, right? Or whatever, on a 4K or up to 60, and some of them go higher than that. And they can't keep up with the object. So you've got some footage. I guarantee you the government's got footage of stuff that would blow our minds. I mean, we saw some of it released recently, right, on the thermal cams and whatnot. But most people, let's face it, most people don't have thermal cams either. So I do, but, most people don't. But the government's got some footage. There's a famous one and I think it was from the 50s or 60s when they were testing ballistic nuclear missiles, and they had some real high tech for that time cameras filming these missiles as they're going into orbit, right? And in one famous, and there's a guy, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was an officer and his job was to run that camera. And when they took the footage out of that camera, they actually captured a UFO. There's a missile going up, and a UFO came into the frame and went around the missile as it's cruising at 20, Mach whatever, and it was shooting beams into the head of the missile, and the missile just falls out of the sky. So, and they've got that on camera, and they've done recreations of it, and he said, yeah, that's what happened. But, that stuff's all being classified because, the government, our government, as well as any other government, doesn't want the rest of the world governments thinking, well, somebody shot one of their missiles out of the sky, because that looks bad on us, right? So who shot their missile out of the sky? We want that technology too. So
I never knew that.
Oh yeah, you can look it up. I mean, it's a pretty famous case actually.
Okay.
But yeah, if you just Google U.S. nuclear missile shot out of the sky by UFO, you'll probably find it, or find him talking about it, and then they do an animation recreation of it. But and this is an Air Force officer, mind you, coming out telling his story, what he saw, and and he was told to never talk about it. He was put on, pretty much threatened. So, and that's just one of many instances out there of stuff like that going down. So.
And you think about too, like the technology and stuff that it would take to get to our planet, for one, like what kind of magnetic fields or radiation and stuff is this stuff putting off that would maybe skew, like taking photographs or videos or whatever. Like we don't know how it would interact. It may be something that we've never even encountered ever.
Well, I've got, in my evidence files, I've been sent some pretty interesting pictures of craft that you can definitely see the craft in, and they were moving very quickly. So, some, let's face it, some of these things are hoaxed. So now we have to even do our more due diligence and have these pictures and these videos looked at by experts to see if there's any manipulation via CG in there, somebody's hoaxing something. So it makes our job even harder now. And most people don't have the resources, because you got to pay experts to do this stuff. Unless you know how to do it yourself, you're looking at some big money right there. They got to go in and spend a lot of time and break down all the pixels and all this stuff. It takes a lot of money to do that. And most investigators and stuff out there don't have the budget for that. So, it's unfortunate that, a lot, especially when it comes to Bigfoot too, there's so many hoaxers out there, people dressing up in suits and run through the woods like idiots and stuff like that. Number one, I highly don't recommend that, because some hillbilly might just decide to take a shot at you. And because that scares the crap out of people, and they're going to shoot at you.
Yeah,
I know around here in West Virginia they will. They see something like that out in the woods, they're going to shoot at you, man.
Same
Kentucky,
thing here in Kentucky.
Yeah, same here. You don't run in the hill. Well, two things you don't do in the hills: you don't miss their crop that they have. You know what I'm talking about, and you don't mess with their shine. And another and you don't go dressed like a deer or a 12-point buck running around in the hills either, because somebody will shoot you too.
That's right. Yeah.
So, from one paranormal investigator to another, has there been a case that you worked on or location you've been to, man, that's pushed you to your limits? Maybe has there been something like that that's kind of shook you, possibly, other than the Bigfoot thing in the paranormal?
Oh, of course, man. I mean, I've had several crazy incidents happen to me over the years. One of them was the notorious house I did, in Pennsylvania called, we dubbed it Wicked 46 when I wrote the book about it. And, it was a case that was a notorious haunted house there in the town. And a friend of ours had saw it for sale, and we put a team together and went there, and turned out the Warrens had actually been there in the 80s. And then their nephew, John Zavis, came down with us. And long story short, I wrote a book about what happened to us. We stayed in there for 30 days the first time, and then one guy never even made it past a week and a half. He rolled out. He was scared to death, and just a whole bunch of stuff happened. But I ended up getting an attachment from that case, and and my life went upside down for about 7, 8 months until I realized what happened. And I went and got blessed by a priest, a minister, and a shaman, and everything turned around. And that's when I knew, okay. But that's a crazy book. It's called Wicked 46. It's on Amazon if you want to check it out. And then, of course, I own the notorious Willow's Weep House as well.
Yeah, that is right.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother story in itself that is ongoing. And I got book number 2 in the works on that, and some major stuff going on with that place too. You guys probably know Barry Gaunt runs Octagon Hall. He's a good friend of mine. He was attacked in that house, and he's had problems from that attack for 2.5 years with his leg. So,
wow.
and it was so bad and so negative. So many negative things happened to other people in that house. I just shut it down. And now it's pretty much unstructurally safe too. But even if it wasn't, I would not allow anyone else back in that house, because it's so negative and so just whatever's in that house is very, very bad. And a lot of people have died in that house. A lot of people have, there's been suicides, ODs. Also, other people that just came into the house to investigate it have had really bad things happen to them in their lives. A couple people that weren't even investigators before the whole investigation started there, before I even owned it, had died too, and one investigator died as well. So there's just a lot of craziness that's going on with that place. If you're into that, at some point, I've already stated that when I finish up what I'm doing with that place, it's getting knocked to the ground, and it's either getting destroyed and burned, or burned and the ground blessed by several different methods, because somebody at some time did something there that opened something up, and something very bad stuff. All kinds of stuff just comes in and out of that place. It's like a open portal. Somebody opened, or it might have just been there even since ancient times. I don't know. And that house happened to be built on top of it, built in the shape of a cross, built by Masons. Had 4 entrances and exits as to funnel energy in. It's just the most bizarre place ever that I've ever even heard of. That's why I ended up buying it after investigating it, because the former owner, I became friends with her and her husband, and they swore that something that was in that house was trying to kill them, and they were done with it. And they picked up and moved. They weren't living in it. They were living next door, and they moved everything 30 miles away, and they were out of there, because too many things happen. And you got to read if you want to read the books and find out more about it. That's the best thing to do, because literally it would take us weeks and weeks on this show to even break the ice, touch the tip of what all the Willow's Weep House has involved with it. So there's a lot of cool stuff in the works with it to get the story out there, probably something really big in the future. So hopefully that all goes, and it'll get the word out on these type of places, because they're out there. And there's a lot of haunted locations, but that Wicked 46 house and that Willow's Weep house that I stayed in the first one, and then I ended up buying the other one, and they're very, very similar in nature as to the occurrences, the deaths, the suicides, and whatnot. It's almost like the perfect storm of the paranormal in those two places. Like so many things have happened in both of those places that it's just like it's unfathomable. All the craziness that's happened in both of those houses. And somehow I was involved with both of them. I don't know how, or I don't know why, but it just happened like that. So it's an ongoing thing with the weep and that thing too. So and both of them, the weird aspect too is they both have Native American ties, significant Native American ties on the land and the whole area around them. So is that one of the precursors that we need to be looking for as investigators? And I've noticed over the years, a lot of these very crazy haunted locations have those ties to them. Whether the early settlers came in and desecrated burial grounds or hunting grounds, and the elemental spirits there are pissed. So it could be something like that, So who knows? But that's all the aspects you need to look at as an investigator.
I tell everybody that, hey, it seems like it's cool on TV, but if you've done it, I mean, I did it for 6 or 7 years, and then I had an attachment. I got into the situation where I had an attachment, and I had to get out of it. I was out of it for a good 10 years, And now I'm starting to get back into it. I got the attachment gone, but once you get that itch, man, it's just like you got to go back. But I do precautionary stuff.
You got to be careful. Yeah, you got to be careful. And let's face it, you can get an attachment anywhere. You can go to the grocery store and get an attachment. But if you're seeking it out and you're looking for it constantly, the odds are more that you're going to have something bad happen to you.
Right.
I don't know too many people that haven't had something negative happen to them doing this type of stuff. But and then there's extreme cases where, if you look at the Constantinos murder-suicide, and they were doing EVPs and everything in their house 24/7, man, and look what happened. So you got to be very mindful of what you're doing. You need to know how to ground yourselves. You need to know how to protect yourselves and clear yourselves after each and every time you go to one of those places. And that's not always guaranteed to work too. So, the first book I wrote about the Wicked 46 book I wrote is a warning to all investigators. Be careful what you ask for, because you might just get it. And that's what happened to me, because I was running and gunning, and I was, back in those days, if I thought something was kind of coming at me in a negative way or attacking me, I would really go at it hard, because I come from a law enforcement military background, and I would give it right back to it. And I'd be like, you get threats on the ghost box, or you get threatening EVPs, and I'd say, I'd be like, F you, you're not doing that to me, and this and that. And next thing you know, I get jacked up by something unseen. I felt like something punched me right in the throat, and I mean, it hurt, and I was coughing and gagging, couldn't breathe. And next thing you know, I go home and I'm all jacked up, and my life goes into a spiral for about 7 months. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? Having nightly nightmares after it. I find out I had cancer in my leg right after that. So, you got to be really, really careful. Now, I'm not saying that gave me cancer, but I had no other precursors to anything. And about 3 weeks to a month after that investigation, I found out I got a tumor in my leg as big as a softball.
Wow.
So where did that come from?
Yeah.
I had no sickness, no nothing. And after that investigation, I had looked like an ingrown hair on the inside of my thigh, and it wasn't. It was that in there in my leg that came out of nowhere. And it got a little bigger, got a little bigger, got a little bigger. Then I said, well, I better, and it wasn't what I thought it was. So I went to the doctor. Next thing you know, I'm in a surgery room 2 weeks later.
Yep. Same thing happened to me, man. And I say this full-heartedly, and you can believe me and Dave or not, we've been down this road. It's like playing Russian roulette. Eventually, that's going to go off. And I will say this. I had the same thing kind of happen to me, but it was in a different location. I can't talk about on the TV, on the show here tomorrow, where this thing came up out on me. Same thing. It was the size of a grapefruit. And they said it was an infected hair or something like that. I'm not a dirty person or anything. They said it, was like, could be either an infected hair or just whatever. But the doctor said it looked like an infected hair, and it ruptured. It ruptured, and I was a moron for 4 days, staying here at the house, going, "Oh, it'll get better. I'll just, soak the blood up with the paper towels." Went through 4 rows of paper towels, and I was like, I got to get my ass to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I went, they did surgery on me the next morning. So
Yep.
it just come out of nowhere. But I'm not saying it's paranormal or anything like that. It's just that,
But there's not, there's not, you could say, well, it's not paranormal, but is there such thing as that many coincidences, and then it happens not to just you, but other people too in the same freaking place. So what's going on here, So you have to, as an investigator, you got to look at all the evidence and look, if you got enough circumstantial evidence, you can take a case to court. So, look at it in that aspect too.
Greg is in the chat room. Greg Graham, thank you so much. Good sir. Good sir. Hey, that's Copperhead. That's my buddy Copperhead.
Oh, I know. Copperhead, what's up?
Good evening, good sir. Glad to have you on here. And he says that the thing to know is you're getting yourself into when you go on investigations. That's 1,000% true. After 8 years in Tala, you learn to expect anything and everything. Dude, that's with anywhere you investigate. And that's true. And it's like I was saying earlier, people are like, that's cool that you do this, blah, blah, blah. It's just interesting that I want to find reasons why this happens. It's not because it's cool to do it. Ain't nothing like that. It's just because there's got to be a reason why. There's got to be we've got to put two and two together somehow, some way. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting. It is very interesting. And just like you, man, I've had EVPs cuss me. I've had and what really, really just blows my mind and just puts the hair up on my arms, man, is when it comes back and laughs at you and call you by your name.
Oh yeah.
That's when shit's real. It's like, what?
Yep. Yep.
You got
and that, the crazy thing is, and I've been scratched a few times at different locations. And the craziest one, though, I was at this old brothel that was ran by the Chicago mob back in, the 30s or whatever, 2030s. And I got my head cracked by something unseen, and it was all on camera. And we had an event that night for the local food bank. Like, we charged people cans of food, and then we donated to the food bank, right, for their payment. And so me and the guy I was with were upstairs in the section of it was called the Rhodes Hotel, but it was actually a brothel way back. And so he was doing a ghost box session, and I went in there and set a static meter on the floor because I was filming him, right? And there's all those people were downstairs watching the live feed. And when I bent over to put that piece of equipment on the floor, I felt this wave of energy just go right through me. It almost knocked me out. Like, I saw tunnel vision for a second. I stumbled back, and I was like, what the? And he's like, what happened? I said, I don't know. Something just felt like it went right through me. It was like an ice cold breeze, this wind. It was the weirdest thing. And I got real kind of dizzy for a few seconds there. And he's like, you don't look right, dude. You better go sit back down. And so I went back behind the camera because I was filming him and sat down. And I kept feeling like that, when you go in a basement and you feel cobwebs all over your head. And it's like, ew, and you're like wiping them off. And it kept happening. And I was like, man, what is this? And the ghost box was getting really negative, and it was saying, kill you, pig. And now I was in law enforcement at the time, right? And everything else. And it was saying, kill you, pig, get out of here, pig, and all this stuff. God. And he's like, well, he goes, who are you? And it said, the box said his name was Ian, right? And he said, well, what'd you do to Dave, Ian? He goes, I hit him. And it goes, I hit him. Just like that on the ghost box. And he's like, we're like, what? And then he said, well, what'd you hit him with? He goes, a shovel, right? And
wow,
this, that, and the other. And it got really negative, kept going negative and negative. So he said, I'm going to shut this down for now. This is getting crazy. And I was feeling like I was going to throw up still. I felt like crap. So we shut it off, went downstairs and all them people. And I sat down and I was, just feeling real sick and yucky. And I felt that cobweb on my head again. And I went like that. And I pulled my hand down, and I had a big knot on my head, and my hand was full of blood, and I had a little gash in my head. And I'm like, what the frick? And I mean, I got pictures of it and everything. It's crazy, man. It's something, and that was a really unnerving thing because I realized then, too, that, this thing, whatever it is, this entity or this really negative human spirit was strong enough to punch through to our side and physically harm me in that manner, because it was saying what it did to me on the box. And we got it on camera, and all those people saw it live, you
My
know.
God.
So it was freaking insane. And then it goes on, and we stayed in this place for a week straight, right? And so the next night, after all the people had left and everything, we were still there for like 3-4 more days. So we're downstairs in the dining room, and I'm filming him again. And the same voice starts coming over to Ghost Box, and he's like, "Is that you again, Ian?" And he said, "Yes." And he's like, "Well, you know," he kind of started giving it a little bit down the road for attacking me, right? He goes, and the box was saying stuff like, "You shut up or I'll cut you up too," and stuff like that. And then I kid you not, in a matter of minutes, he's like, "Dude, my back is on freaking fire." And I'm like, "What?" I said, "Don't move." I said, "Turn around and back up straight to the camera." So he backed up to the camera, and I lifted his shirt up on camera, and he had 3 ginormous scratches from his shoulder all the way down past his belt line, and they were welted up, just ready to start bleeding.
Oh
And
man.
he was like, "Man, I don't feel good." And he goes, "I got to go outside and throw up." So he ran outside. He's out there dry heaving. But here's the kicker. So he had a long sleeve Under Armour shirt on, a T-shirt over top of that, and it was tucked into his pants. He had a belt on and everything. There's no way he could have,
Wow.
accidentally scratched himself. He was in the middle of the room the whole time it was on camera. So long story short, later on we find out from the owner that she had a guy who was caretaking the place for her and letting groups in. Well, turns out he was doing some really demonic, satanic practices in the house and trying to conjure spirits into these dolls that he had hidden in the floorboards of the place.
That's
And
my worst nightmare.
we found them, and we took them out of there. And
Oh
so it was really crazy how it all went down. But yeah, and so we both got pretty messed up from that place physically, like stuff scratching us. And then I had a big and the weird thing is the knot was gone on my head the next day, and I only had a little teeny mark on the top of my head where the knot was.
So
And it was
weird.
gone real quick. But when I went like that, my hand was covered in blood. I had
Right.
blood all over my hand.
So that was at the Rhodes Hotel?
Rhodes Hotel, yep, Indiana.
My buddy Mike Couch owns that place now.
Mm-hmm. And that was before he owned it. That was way before he owned it.
Yeah,
So,
I've asked him though, man. I was like, has anything crazy went on there? And he said it's kind of docile. I mean, there's stuff goes on, but you know what you're talking about. I'd say you removed everything that negative out of there.
Well, I mean, we hope too that taking those dolls out of there would help that, and maybe it did. I don't know, but I think she had it blessed and a whole bunch of stuff before she sold it too, because it was very negative before, when all that stuff was going down there.
Crit, you want to say read Michael's, or I should say Copperhead. I call him Copperhead. I'm not used to seeing Greg on here like that. I call him Copperhead. You want to read what Copperhead said there?
He said, "When I started at Tala, I didn't believe that the Hollywood stuff was exactly that. Found out they can scratch, punch, shove, stab, bite, etc. LOL, rude. Rude awakening for sure. Even felt a needle stab and it drew blood."
Mm-hmm.
Jeez. Yeah. I mean, it happens. It's just like I said. It's like Russian roulette. Eventually, you go looking for it. It's going to happen. I've been scratched. I've been kicked. I've had to the point where, like Dave's talking about, where his friend got to the point where he wanted to throw up. I've felt like that before, and come home and threw up. And I've had some weird experiences.
Oh yeah, I've had many crazy, just weird stuff go on over the years. But Copperhead, he worked at Towel, like you said, for years. And I used to, before the new owners had it, when he was working there, I used to go in there at will. And I've got some just insane EVPs in that place and stuff over the years. And then, then they took it over, and, it wasn't as fun because you had to pay big money to go in there.
Oh yeah. I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. I'm going to put it on layaway or something or sell a kidney.
But it's definitely worth it if you get a chance to do a private in there. I highly recommend it. It's probably in my top 3 most haunted locations I've ever been in. I mean, it's super off the chain haunted. So
I would guarantee it. I would guarantee it, sir. All right, Mr. Dave Spinks, how can folks stay in touch with you? Buy these books that you have out, and if they need you to come out to help them with anything, how can they do that, sir?
Well, you can just go on my website. It's DaveSpinksParanormalInvestigator.com. You can see everything I've got right on there. Come visit us at the new store, Dave Spinks World of Weird in Richwood, West Virginia, where I call it a paranormal and metaphysical madness because we have 8,000 square feet where we've combined all the paranormal and metaphysical stuff. Nothing else like it probably in the whole country, so it's everything I do plus what my girlfriend does. And we have events. We're putting on events now. We had West Virginia Monster Con in March. So that's going to be a yearly event every year. And then we have little smaller events too, where we have guest speakers come in. Like I got Ron Murphy coming in November doing a cryptid talk, and I'll have Johnny Z coming in the spring. John Zappos will be there. And just get on our Facebook, follow us for upcoming events. You can come and see those guys talk and get their books, whatever. I have, Ken Gerhardt's books, Lyle Blackburn, mine, Stan Gordon's, John Zapp's, many other people's stuff in the store as well. So it's a really cool spot. A lot of stuff going on there, and more to come there as well. And all my books are on Amazon. If you just go type in Dave Spinks author, you'll see what books I've got out. I got a brand new Dogman book coming out, West Virginia Dogman, in a week or two. So that's a brand new one that'll be coming out, and more coming, man.
Dave, I hope that we get to work with you because I definitely want to make some connections and work with good-hearted folks. And I want to, work with you on some things if that's okay with you.
And thank you for your service too. Like you've mentioned the military thing, but like, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Next week, folks, next free for all. I'm going to try to get Copperhead. He'll come on here and jab with us. But if not, we'll talk about our upcoming Halloween stream and plus our Halloween events, stuff like that we've got coming up. So, hey, check this out. And please go support Dave. Follow him, buy all the stuff he's got out there. Plus, do not forget to go to Beyond the Paranormal Podcast YouTube page and click that subscribe button and notification bell because we have a kick-ass show, folks. We just have a good time on here. It all ain't uptight and suits and collars and all that. That's crap. So thank you all so much. Dave, stay on here for a minute. I want to talk with you, brother, if you don't care. So, folks, we will see you next Tuesday. Copperhead, everybody, thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.
Creeps.